I was scrubbing a toilet at the airport when a man stopped and asked, "Is your mother's name Claire?" His next 3 words fractured my old life. Turns out, my no-money family was sitting on a 9-figure fortune, and someone had signed my name to documents I'd never seen. Tonight, in the departures hall, a legal takedown goes live on the flight board, and the last name called will be my mother's. My name is Zoe Jenkins. I'm 28 years old, and for every single one of those years, I've been the person people look through, not at. I grew up in an industrial town in the Midwest, the kind of place that smells like damp iron and resignation. Our house was small, vinyl-sided, and perpetually cramped, not with possessions, but with unspoken rules. The biggest rule was that my sister, Maya, was the sun, and I was the planet hidden behind her, obligated to orbit, but never allowed to shine. In our family, visibility was a resource, and it was allocated entirely to Maya. She was 2 years younger, effortlessly bright, the kind of girl who collected achievements like charms on a bracelet. I was the opposite: quiet, practical, good with my hands, and completely invisible. The dinner table was the primary stage for my erasure. Every night at 6, we'd sit, my mother, Claire, at one end, her husband, Rick, who varied in presence and sobriety, at the other, Maya in the center, and me, opposite her. "I got the lead in the spring play," Maya would announce, pushing her green beans around her plate. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful." Claire would light up, her whole posture changing, leaning in. "Rick, did you hear that? Our Maya, a star?" And, Maya would continue, "Mrs. Gable said my essay on The Great Gatsby was the best in the junior class. She wants me to enter it in the state competition." "That's my girl," Rick would mumble, reaching for the salt. I would sit there, my hands sore from my shift at the distribution center. Smelling faintly of cardboard and grease, I'd try to contribute. "We set a new record for outbound processing today. Hit 98% efficiency on the line." Claire would give me a short, tight nod, her eyes already drifting back to Maya. "That's nice, Zoe. Don't let your food get cold." It was never, "Tell me about that," or "What does that mean?" It was just nice, a conversational dead end. I could have announced I'd just juggled fire and no one would have looked up from Maya's honor roll certificate. After a while, I stopped trying. I just ate, my silence a gray blanket that matched the vinyl siding of the house. No one ever asked, "Zoe, how was your day?" The silence wasn't just about my daily life. It was about our entire history, specifically, my mother's history. Claire existed without a past. She had sprung fully formed into this Midwest town, and any attempt to dig deeper was met with a terrifying coldness. The forbidden subject was her family, my family. "Mom, where did you grow up?" I asked once, maybe when I was 12. Still naive enough to think the question was innocent. She was ironing, pressing creases into Rick's work shirts with violent precision. "Here." "No, I mean before here. Where are your parents? Where is—" "My grandpa." The iron hissed. She set it down with a heavy thud. "Zoe, don't daydream." Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "There is nothing for you there. We are here. This is it." "But everyone has a grandpa." "We don't." She picked up the iron again. The subject was closed. It wasn't just a request to stop asking. It was a command. Dreaming about things you don't have is a waste of energy. We have work to do. I learned. I stopped asking. But I never stopped wondering. The only evidence of my existence before the age of 5 was a single photograph, and it was the most violent act of my childhood. It sat on the mantel, tucked behind a ceramic angel Maya had made in 3rd grade. It was an old print, thick and glossy. My father, before he left. My mother, younger. Her smile tight even then. Maya, a round-faced baby on her lap. And me, or most of me. I was standing next to my mother, maybe 4 years old. My small hand was just visible, resting on her arm. But the photograph had been physically cut, sliced with scissors right at the edge of my mother's sleeve. My shoulder was there, a sliver of my blue t-shirt, my face, my head, my entire identity was gone. The first time I saw it, I felt a confusing, sharp pain, like breathing in ice. "Mom, where's the rest of me?" I asked, my voice small. I must have been 8. Claire didn't even look up from the bills she was sorting on the kitchen table. "It was for the frame. Zoe, it didn't fit." "But, you cut my head off." "Don't be dramatic," she snapped, her pen scratching. "It was to make it fit." To make it fit. I learned that lesson so well it settled into my bones. To fit in this family, my presence had to be trimmed, cut down, made smaller until only a fragment remained. So I built a life in the margins. While Maya was being groomed for scholarships and a life beyond our town, I was preparing for reality. I started working at 16, stocking shelves at the local grocery depot, the fluorescent lights humming over my head for 8-hour shifts. I saved every dollar I could. I was good with systems. I liked knowing how things moved, how a pallet of soda got from a truck to a shelf, how a manifest was checked and balanced. It was practical. It was real. When I graduated high school with decent grades that no one noticed, I used my savings to enroll at the local community college. I chose logistics. It felt like the science of the unseen. How a package gets from A to B. The network of trucks and planes and people that no one thinks about. It just works. It was efficiency without applause. It suited me. But life, as it always did, pressed in. Rick lost his job at the plant. The no money refrain in our house grew louder, more desperate. The transmission on our shared car went out. I was 3 semesters in, pulling a 3.4 GPA. The choice was stark: pay my tuition for the spring semester, or pay the heating bill for the house. I paid the heat. I dropped out and took a full-time job at a larger warehouse, the one out by the highway. I learned to drive a forklift. I learned to manage inventory, and I learned to stop dreaming. The silence from my mother's side of the family was absolute. We had no relatives, no Christmas cards, no birthday calls, no aunts or uncles. It was just us, an isolated little island of dysfunction, except for the postcards. Maybe once every 2 or 3 years, one would appear in our mailbox. The cardstock was always thick, expensive, the image on the front stark and beautiful. A lighthouse in Maine, whipped by spray, a snowy street in Boston, gaslights glowing. New England, the back was always the same. Our address, printed in neat, unfamiliar handwriting, a stamp, and nothing else. No message, no signature. The first time one arrived, I brought it in with the rest of the mail. Claire snatched it from my hand as if it were on fire. Her lips tightened into a white line. She looked at it for a long second, her face unreadable, and then, without a word, she tore it into 4 small pieces and dropped it in the trash. After that, I learned to spot them first. I'd see the New England landscape, and I'd just slip the postcard into my pocket. I kept them for a while, hidden under my mattress, trying to decipher a meaning that wasn't there. They were clues to nowhere. When no one sees you, you have to learn to see yourself. I found my value in competence. I could organize a chaotic loading dock in 20 minutes. I could lift 50-pound boxes faster than any of the men on my shift. I could fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom and patch the drywall in the hall. My worth was built on things that were useful, things that didn't require an audience. I was the foundation, unseen, but solid. But the silence, the questions, the void where my mother's family should have been, it left an empty space inside me, a question mark that only grew bigger as I got older. I wasn't a big journaler. My hands were usually too tired and stiff at the end of the day. But one night, after another excruciating dinner celebrating Maya's acceptance into the state university, an acceptance that meant my own savings account was now permanently drained for her dorm fees, I found an old spiral notebook. I sat on my bed, the thin mattress creaking. I wrote down one sentence. Just one. Someday, I'm going to ask the right person. It wasn't a plan. It was a promise to myself, a tiny, hard knot of defiance in a life of compliance. Claire kept her secrets in one place. It was a gray metal box, the kind you buy at an office supply store for petty cash, with a small, cheap lock. It lived on the top shelf of her closet, buried under a stack of old blankets that smelled like cedar and dust. A piece of yellowed masking tape was stuck to the front. In her neat, controlled cursive, it read, "Tax papers." Even as a kid, I knew it was a lie. You don't hide tax papers like that. You don't bury them under blankets on the highest shelf. You hide shame. You hide fear. You hide a past you never want to see the light of day. I was 15, home alone, faking a fever to get a day of quiet. The house was still. I felt that pull, that same curiosity that made me hoard the blank postcards. I went to her bedroom. I pulled the small stool from the bathroom, stood on it, and my fingers brushed the cold metal. It was heavier than I expected. I had it in my hands, halfway off the shelf. When the front door slammed open, I hadn't even heard her car pull in. "Zoe." I froze. I almost dropped the box. "What are you doing?" Her voice wasn't just angry. It was thin, high-pitched with a panic I had never heard before. It was pure terror. She lunged across the small bedroom, moving faster than I'd ever seen her move, and ripped the box from my hands. She clutched it to her chest, as if it were a life raft, and she was drowning. "You never, ever touch this," she screamed, her face white, her knuckles white on the box. "Do you understand me? Never." It wasn't the reaction of a mother protecting her finances. It was the reaction of someone guarding a bomb. She looked at me, her eyes wide, as if I had just tried to detonate our entire, fragile life. I backed away, my hands raised. "I'm sorry, I thought." "Get out," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Get out of my room." I ran. I never went near the box again. I never asked about her family again, but I never forgot. The seed of the mystery, the why of the cut photograph, the who of the New England postcards, and the what of that locked metal box it was planted deep. Claire had spent my entire life trying to stamp it out, trying to convince me there was nothing there, nothing to dream about, but all she had done was bury it deeper inside me. I learned to be quiet. I learned to watch. I learned to wait. And I learned to remember every single detail, and my life is measured by the squeak of a mop bucket wheel. I work at Haven Ridge International Airport, not for an airline, not in one of the bright, overpriced snack shops. I am custodial staff, graveyard shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The work pays $13 an hour, which is just enough to cover the rent on my studio apartment and the minimum payments on the student loans I still owe for the logistics degree I never finished. I am in a constant, grinding cycle of debt, the numbers always staying just ahead of me. I am 28 years old, and my biggest aspiration is a weekend shift that pays time and a half. I chose the night shift. I prefer it. During the day, the airport is a roaring beast of anxiety, reunions, and frustration. People rush past, their faces buried in phones, dragging suitcases. They treat the custodial staff as obstacles, invisible fixtures like the water fountains or the charging ports. But at night, the beast sleeps. My world becomes a cathedral of silence. The great halls empty out. The lights dim to a bluish glow. My only companions are the low hum of the floor buffer as I guide it over the terrazzo, the rhythmic snap of my latex gloves as I change a trash liner, and the disembodied voice of the PA system. Final boarding call for Flight 556 to Phoenix, Gate B9. It's a lonely sound, but it's peaceful. In the quiet, I can think, I can breathe. I'm not Maya's overlooked sister or Claire's silent daughter. I'm just Zoe, the person who makes the floor shine. Tonight was a Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday morning, at 3 a.m. The distinction blurs. I was in the main departures hall, Terminal C, working the bathrooms by the international gates. The air hung thick with the sharp chemical smell of industrial bleach and that faint, sour odor of unwashed travelers. I was on my knees, scrubbing the grout around the base of a toilet stall when I felt it, that prickle on the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched. I finished the stall, gathered my supplies, and pushed my heavy yellow cart back into the concourse. He was the only person sitting in a section of seating rated for 200. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with a full head of thick silver hair, perfectly combed. He wore a dark wool suit that looked like it had been tailored just for him, even from across the hall. I could see the high-gloss shine on his black leather shoes. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not in the empty wastes of Terminal C at 3 a.m. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't reading. He was just sitting, his hands resting on a slim leather briefcase, and he was staring directly at me. I ignored him. It's the first rule of night shift. Don't engage. The people awake at this hour are either desperate, drunk, or running from something. I pushed my cart, the left wheel doing its usual wobble squeak, and started toward the next set of bins. He stood up. He was tall, and he moved with a deliberate lack of urgency. He intercepted me, standing directly in the path of my cart. I stopped, annoyance rising. "Excuse me, sir." I kept my eyes focused on the center of his expensive-looking tie. "My apologies," he said. His voice was deep, smooth, and had an unmistakable East Coast accent. Boston, maybe? "I have a quick question for you." "Sir, I'm working," I said, my hand tightening on the cart handle. "I can see that." He didn't move. He looked at me, really looked at me, with an uncomfortable intensity. "Is your mother's name Claire?" The world stopped. The hum of the floor buffered down the hall, the distant chime of the PA system, the air in my lungs, it all froze. My blood turned to ice. I gripped the plastic handle of the cart so hard my knuckles ached. I looked up, meeting his eyes. They were sharp, gray, and held no trace of humor. "Who are you?" My voice came out as a strained whisper. "My name is Arthur Keene," he said, as if this should mean something to me. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. "I am an attorney. I represent a family trust based in Boston." Boston, the postcards, the lighthouse in the fog, the unsigned, unspoken messages from nowhere. "I don't know anyone in Boston," I said. It was the automatic answer, the defense mechanism my mother had drilled into me since I was old enough to ask. "We don't talk about that. We don't dream about that." "I believe you do," Arthur Keene said softly. He wasn't holding a business card. He was holding an old photograph, thick and laminated, the colors slightly faded. He held it out for me to see. My breath hitched. It was Claire, but a Claire I had never known. She was young, maybe 19 or 20. Her hair long and loose, and she was on a boat. The wind was in her hair, and she was smiling. It was a huge, unguarded, genuinely happy smile. And in her arms, she was holding a baby. A little girl in a red sundress, with a face full of dimples, laughing at the camera. I leaned in, my latex glove brushing the photograph. I saw it, just below the baby's left eye, so small it was almost invisible, was a tiny crescent-shaped white scar. I instinctively raised my hand to my own cheek, my finger tracing the same scar, the one I'd had for as long as I could remember. This wasn't the picture on the mantel. This wasn't the version of me that had been sliced off to make the frame fit. This was me, whole. "Where did you get this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "It was in your grandfather's study." He calmly tucked the photograph back into his pocket. "I'm here, Ms. Jenkins, to invite you to Boston, tomorrow." A sound, half cough, half laugh, tore out of my throat. "Tomorrow? Are you looking at me? I'm scrubbing grime off a floor. I have a shift tomorrow night. I don't have money to fly to Boston for some inheritance scam." "It is not a scam," he said, his face hardening just slightly. "And I am aware of your schedule. This is regarding the estate of Walter Gray." The name hit me like a physical blow. Walter Gray, a name I had never heard. But I knew, with a certainty that settled in my bones, that this was the name of the man we were forbidden to mention. "I don't have a grandfather," I recited. the words tasting like bleach. My mother was very clear. Arthur Keene's eyes narrowed. He glanced around the empty concourse, then took a half-step closer, lowering his voice. The PA system chimed, announcing a gate change for a 6 a.m. flight to Dallas. "Your mother," he said, "has been actively untruthful. Walter Gray, her father, passed away 8 weeks ago. His estate is significant. So she can have it." "That is the problem," Arthur said. "According to our files, your mother filed a formal renunciation of her inheritance 13 years ago. She legally disavowed any claim." "Then what does that have to do with me?" "A renunciation filed by a primary heir typically passes the inheritance down to the next of kin. To you." He paused. "But your name is not in the file. Another document was filed simultaneously, a document that diverted the inheritance away from the family line entirely. I thought of the gray metal box, tax papers. I thought of my mother's face, white with panic, when I tried to touch it." He lowered his voice again. "The primary heir, your mother, effectively, vanished from the records, and you, the secondary heir, vanished with her." My head was spinning. "I don't understand. What are you saying?" "I am saying," Arthur said, his voice precise, "that for the last 13 years, your family's assets, a fortune in the 9-figure range, have been managed by a third party, and we have reason to believe that the documents that made this possible were fraudulent." 9 figures. The words didn't compute. It was a number so large it was meaningless. I looked at my hands, covered in blue latex, stained with grime. Why me? Why now? Walter Gray was a very specific man. His will contains an integrity trigger, a fail-safe. He stipulated that his heir must be engaged in self-sufficient, productive labor, not living off unearned privilege. He was terrified of creating a dynasty of soft, useless people. Arthur Keene looked at my uniform, at my cart. "For 2 months, we've been searching for a Zoe Jenkins connected to Claire. We found you, here, working a custodial shift. You are, quite literally, the only person who could possibly satisfy that trigger." He seemed to read the disbelief, the fear, the crushing weight of confusion on my face. "I do not expect you to believe me on faith," he said. He bent down and picked up his leather briefcase. He clicked it open and pulled out a thick 9x12 manila envelope. It was sealed. He didn't hand it to me. He placed it deliberately on the flat top of my yellow cart, right next to my spray bottle of Windex. "I cannot force you to come," he said. "The choice is yours, but if you are who I believe you are being robbed." Inside that envelope is a formal letter of engagement from my firm, Keene and Bell. There is also a prepaid, overnight DNA testing kit. My card is clipped to it. Swab your cheek. Use the return label. It will confirm, legally, what that photograph already told you. I stared at the envelope. It seemed to pulse under the fluorescent lights. He nodded, a sharp, formal gesture. "We will be waiting for your call, Ms. Jenkins." He turned and began to walk away, his polished shoes clicking softly on the tile. He'd taken 3 steps when he paused and looked back. Not at me, but at my plastic name tag, pinned crookedly to my shirt. "Zoe," he said, testing the name. He would have liked that. "Who?" I whispered. "Walter Gray, your grandfather. I worked for him for 40 years. A flicker of something sadness maybe crossed his face. "He was a difficult man, but a brilliant one, and seeing you now," his gaze fixed on my face, sharp and assessing. "You are the only one who looks like him. He had the same eyes. They looked right through things." He turned again and walked away, disappearing around the corner toward the security checkpoint. I was alone again, just me, my cart, and the smell of bleach. But the silence of the terminal was different now. It was roaring. I looked down at the envelope. My hand, still in its glove, was shaking. High above my head, the massive digital flight board for Terminal C made a soft clack, clack, clack sound. The letters and numbers flipped, resetting for the morning rush. The flight at gate 12. The gate right in front of me. Changed. Boston. 6:00 a.m. Gate 12. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. I didn't sleep after Arthur Keene left. I finished my shift in a total daze, the chemical smell of the disinfectant mixing with the phantom scent of old money and betrayal. The hum of the floor buffer felt like a countdown. I drove home at 6:15 a.m., the sun just a dirty smear of gray light in the Midwest sky. I walked into my studio apartment, past the pile of my uniform for the laundry, and stood in my tiny kitchen. The manila envelope was on my counter. It looked obscene next to my unpaid electric bill, the DNA kit. I tore it open. The instructions were clinical. I swabbed the inside of my cheek, the sterile cotton scraping against my skin, tasting like plastic and salt. It felt invasive, a violation. I sealed it in the biohazard bag, placed it in the prepaid overnight mailer, and affixed the label. Done. I called my supervisor at Haven Ridge. I lied. I told him there was a severe family emergency and I needed 2 days off. The words, family emergency, tasted like acid in my mouth. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe around it. Then I opened my laptop. I stared at my bank account, $312, my entire buffer against the world. I found the cheapest possible flight back to Boston. A ticket with a 2-hour layover in Chicago that cost $240. My savings, the money I'd been hoarding for a new transmission, vanished in a single click. The flight was misery. I was in a middle seat, still smelling faintly of bleach, crammed between a salesman who smelled like cheap cologne and a college kid blasting music. Zoe Jenkins, owner of 2 pairs of work pants and a maxed-out credit card, was apparently the missing heiress to a fortune built on the ocean. The absurdity was staggering. Boston was a shock. It was cold. The November air snapping with the clean, sharp scent of the sea. It smelled ancient and wealthy, a world away from the damp iron smell of my hometown. I took a cab from Logan, the meter clicking past amounts that made my stomach clench, and gave the driver the address Arthur had written on his card. It was an old, granite-faced building in the financial district. The name on the discreet brass plaque read, Keene and Bell, Attorneys at Law. The lobby was silent, marble and dark wood. The elevator rose smoothly, smelling of lemon oil and old leather. This building had more money in its foundation than my entire town. Arthur's office was on the 14th floor. When the elevator doors opened, I wasn't in a hallway. I was in his reception area. It was less an office and more a library. Dark oak shelves stretched from the floor to the ceiling, filled with leather-bound books that looked 1,000 years old. The air was still and warm, and on the walls, framed in the same dark wood, were maps. Not just maps. They were old nautical charts, ancient, hand-drawn routes of the Atlantic, the trade winds inked in careful script. The shipping lanes of the world, the routes of gray maritime logistics. Ms. Jenkins, Arthur Keene emerged from a side door. He was in the same dark suit, but here, on his own turf, he seemed 10 feet tall. He was not an apparition in an airport. He was a general in his war room. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice as smooth as the polished wood. He gestured toward his inner office. "Please." I followed him in. His personal office overlooked the harbor. I could see the water, gray and choppy, and the massive container ships moving slowly in the distance. He motioned to a heavy leather chair that felt like it would swallow me whole, sitting opposite his massive desk. "Coffee." "No, thank you." My stomach was a knot of acid and cheap airline peanuts. He sat. He didn't waste time. He placed his hands on top of a single, thick, pale blue file folder that was waiting in the exact center of his desk blotter. "I submitted your DNA kit to the lab the moment I returned. I utilized a court-ordered expedite, citing probate urgency. We will have legal, confirmed verification within 48 hours. He paused, tapping the folder. "I do not believe we need to wait. Time is not our ally. I want you to understand exactly what you are facing." He opened the folder. The first page was a simple summary. "Walter Gray, my employer for 40 years, and your grandfather, He founded Gray Maritime Logistics 50 years ago. Starting with one leased freighter, he was a force of nature. Arthur slid the summary across the desk. It wasn't a story, it was a list of assets. Shipping terminals in 3 countries, a fleet of container ships, real estate holdings in Boston and New York, a liquid investment portfolio. I scanned the columns, my eyes blurring, the numbers looking like nonsense. I saw the total at the bottom. Estimated value, $420 million. I felt dizzy. I gripped the arms of the leather chair. Walter passed away 8 weeks ago, Arthur said, his voice quiet. He was 91. He was working until the day he had the stroke. He turned the page. His will is a very specific document. He drafted most of it himself. To my eternal frustration, he despised inherited wealth. He'd seen it destroy 2 generations of his peers. He was terrified of creating, in his words, a dynasty of soft, useless people. He pointed to a highlighted paragraph. Section 4, Clause B. We call it the integrity trigger. It stipulates that the primary beneficiary, upon the moment of his death, must be engaged in verifiable, self-sufficient labor, independent of any family trust or privilege. He wanted an heir who worked, an heir who knew the value of a dollar earned. He looked up at me, his gray eyes piercing. He was describing you, Ms. Jenkins, unintentionally, perhaps, but with perfect accuracy. But my mother, I stammered. Indeed, he pulled out the next document. It was a simplified family tree. Walter Gray, a single line descended from his name to one box, Claire Gray only child. Below her, a second line to a second box. Zoe Jenkins granddaughter, my name, printed on a legal document connected to $400 million. But next to my mother's name, there was a handwritten note in the margin, dated 1997. Communication obscure. Arthur read aloud. Your mother severed all contact with Walter 28 years ago. He tried to find her. He sent inquiries. The postcards. The blank, unsigned postcards from New England. They weren't messages. They were questions. They were attempts. He respected her silence, even if it pained him, Arthur continued. But he never, ever disinherited her. His will was explicit, to my daughter, Claire, and her issue. His face tightened, which brings us to the problem. 10 years ago, this document was filed with our office and subsequently with the Massachusetts Probate Court. It arrived via a third-party courier from an unknown firm. He slid a high-resolution photocopy across the desk. It was a legal form, title Renunciation of Inheritance. It formally and irrevocably disavowed any and all claims by Claire Gray upon the estate of Walter Gray, and at the bottom, a signature. Claire Gray. I stared at it. It looked like her handwriting, the same controlled, neat cursive I saw on the tax papers label. But it was wrong. It was shaky. But it was too shaky. It was a performance of being shaky. We have samples of your mother's signature from old bank files and her original driver's license, Arthur said, pulling out 2 other documents and placing them alongside. Look at the C. Your mother's C is a single, confident loop. This one, he pointed to the renunciation. It has a slight hook at the beginning, a tremor. It's the tremor of someone imitating a signature, not writing their own. My heart was hammering against my ribs. She was forced to sign it. It's worse than that, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The signature is only half of the fraud. By law, a renunciation by Claire should have made you, Zoe Jenkins, the immediate primary heir. The inheritance would simply skip her and pass to you. He produced a second document, time-stamped the exact same day, filed by the same unknown courier. This, he said, his voice filled with contempt, is a supplementary filing to clarify beneficiary status. It cites your mother's disappearance and the unknown status and location of any potential grandchildren. It effectively redesignated the entire estate. To who? My voice was barely audible. It diverted the beneficiary status from my daughter and her issue to a temporary executive trust, established to manage and protect Gray Maritime Holdings until a suitable heir could be located. I couldn't speak. I had been legally erased. Who controls the trust? I finally managed to ask. Arthur Keene looked me dead in the eye. A distant relative, a nephew of Walter's late wife, from a family Walter despised for being lazy, a man named Robert Hale. Robert Hale. The name meant nothing to me. It was a ghost who had stolen my life. So this, Robert, he's been running the company. He's been looting the company, Arthur corrected, his anger clear. He has been paying himself a management fee in the high six figures every single month for 10 years. He has systematically siphoned millions, all under the legal guise of protecting the estate. He effectively disinherited you from the root. When Walter died 8 weeks ago, Robert filed a petition to have the trust made permanent, claiming the family line was extinct. Extinct. The word echoed in the opulent, silent room. I was sitting right there, my hands raw from scrubbing chemicals, and I was extinct. The integrity trigger was Walter's only defense, Arthur said. He wrote it himself. It created a legal loophole that Robert Hale could not close. The will demands a working heir. It supersedes the fraudulent trust. Robert has been petitioning the court to have the clause dismissed as archaic, assuming no such heir existed. Then I found you. He steepled his fingers. The DNA will prove you are Claire's daughter. It will prove the family line is not extinct. But that is not enough. We need to prove the intent of the fraud. We need to unravel the entire 10-year lie. We need to prove your mother's signature was forged. I stared at the forged signature, the slight tremor in the loop of the C. A memory, cold and sharp, flashed in my mind. The gray metal box, the smell of cedar and dust, my mother's face, a mask of pure, white-hot panic, her scream. Never touch this. Arthur was watching me. His gaze was impossibly sharp, as if he could see the memory playing behind my eyes. Ms. Jenkins, he said, his voice slow and deliberate. In your mother's home, back in the Midwest. Did she ever keep a lockbox, a safe anywhere? She kept what she called important papers. My blood turned to ice. I looked up from the forgery, meeting his stare. My voice was hoarse. A gray metal box, I whispered. On the top shelf of her closet, Arthur leaned forward, the intensity in his eyes locking onto me. What did she tell you was in it? Tax papers, I said. A small, cold, terrible smile touched the corner of Arthur Keene's mouth. People like Robert Hale are arrogant, but they are not stupid. He wouldn't risk a forgery of this magnitude without leverage. He would need to ensure your mother was too terrified or too compromised to ever contest it. He looked from my face back to the forged signature. He needed her to be silent. What if he convinced her to sign something else entirely? And what if the real documents, the proof of your existence, the leverage he holds over her, are in that box? The pieces slammed into place, the panic in my mother's eyes, the 28 years of silence, the lies, the cut photograph. The gray metal box wasn't hiding her past. It was hiding my future. I stood up. The heavy leather chair hissed in the quiet room. I have to go back, I said. Yes, Arthur agreed, also standing. You do. We cannot move on this until we know what is in that box. We need a warrant, or we need probable cause. But you, he looked at me. The invisible girl, the custodial worker, the extinct heir. You are her daughter. You have a right to see documents that pertain to you. I'm not on the lease, I said, my mind racing. I have my own apartment. But you are family, Arthur countered. We will draft a limited power of attorney, giving you the right to retrieve any and all documents bearing your name. Zoe Jenkins. It's thin, but it's a legal foothold. You fly back. You get into that box. And if she says no, then you call me, Arthur said, his voice turning to steel. And I will bring the full weight of Walter Gray's estate down on that vinyl-sided house. But first, we try the quiet way." I nodded. I was no longer a confused girl in an airport. I was a legal strategy. I was the integrity trigger. "I'll take the next flight home," I said. "I need to see what she's been hiding from me my entire life." The flight back to the Midwest was 6 hours of suspended animation. I was no longer a person. I was a legal document. I was a power of attorney. I was the small, printed name on a cheap airline ticket, hurtling back toward the gray vinyl-sided house that had served as my prison. The flimsy paper Arthur had given me, the limited power of attorney to retrieve documents, felt impossibly heavy in my jacket pocket. I took a cab from the airport. I didn't have the energy to walk to the long-term lot. I stood on the cracked concrete walkway, the one I had helped Rick pour one summer, and stared at the front door. It was the same cheap, dented metal door. It looked smaller, pathetic. I knocked. I didn't use my key. I heard muffled movement inside, the sound of the TV, and then the scrape of the deadbolt. The door opened a crack, held by the chain. Claire's eye, magnified by her reading glasses, peered out. "Zoe, what on earth you're supposed to be at work?" "I need to come in. Mom." She saw my face, my small travel bag, and the chain rattled as she slid it free. "What's wrong?" "Did you get fired? I told you not to take so much time off." I stepped inside. The house smelled the same: dust, old carpet, and the faint, greasy odor of last night's dinner. My sister, Maya, was nowhere to be seen. "I need the gray metal box from your closet," I said. Her face, which had been set in a mask of mild annoyance, froze. "What?" "The box, the one labeled tax papers. I need to see what's inside it." A laugh, sharp and brittle, escaped her. "Don't be ridiculous, Zoe. That's just old tax returns and our insurance policies. There's nothing in there for you." She moved to close the door, a gesture of dismissal. I put my hand flat against the wood, stopping it. "I don't think that's true. I have reason to believe there are documents in that box that have my name on them, and I have a legal right to see them." The color drained from her face. She took a step back, pulling her thin cardigan tighter around herself. "Legal right? What are you talking about? Who have you been talking to?" "It was that man. Wasn't it? At the airport? I knew it. I knew they'd come sniffing around." Her fear was turning to anger. The same cold anger she used to shut down any question about her past. "He abandoned us. Zoe, do you understand? Your grandfather threw us away. He threw me away. There is nothing for you there but pain. I protected you from that." "He's dead. Mom," I said, my voice flat, the words hung in the stale air. "Walter Gray died 8 weeks ago." She flinched, a small, involuntary jerk. "And his will," I continued, pressing the advantage, "contains something called the integrity trigger." That was the word, the key. Her face collapsed. It wasn't anger anymore. It was pure, unadulterated terror. The same terror I'd seen when I was 15, reaching for that box. She knew exactly what that phrase meant. "You don't know," she whispered, shaking her head. "You don't know what you're doing. You have to leave this alone." "I can't." A sleek, black sedan, a car that did not belong on our street, pulled into the driveway, its tires crunching on the gravel. A man in a tailored suit, not as fine as Arthur's, but expensive for this town, got out. He was in his late 50s, with a practiced, easy smile and cold, assessing eyes. He walked up to the door as if he owned the place. "Claire, what's all the commotion? I came as soon as you called." He looked at me, his smile widening, but it didn't reach his eyes. "And this must be Zoe. My goodness, look at you, all grown up." He stepped past me, into the living room, and put a proprietary arm around my mother's shoulders. Claire leaned into him, a rescued gesture that made my stomach turn. "Zoe, this is our family friend, Robert Hale." Claire stammered. "Robert Hale, the ghost from the probate file. The man who had looted my inheritance. He was here, in my mother's living room, holding her like a prize. So, Robert said, his tone all fake concern. Claire mentioned you'd been contacted by some lawyers from Boston. I hope they're not filling your head with fantasies. He was fishing, trying to see my hand. I didn't answer him. I took my phone out of my pocket. Who are you calling? Honey? Robert asked, his smile faltering. A locksmith, I said. Claire gasped. Robert's smile vanished, replaced by a dark flush. Now, hold on. You can't just come in here and start breaking things. That box is your mother's private property. I'm not breaking anything, I said, my voice as cold and clear as the Boston air. I pulled the folded document from my jacket. This is a limited power of attorney, authorizing me to retrieve any and all documents, financial or personal, bearing my name, Zoe Jenkins. I am calling a professional to open a lock that contains my property. If you or my mother attempt to stop me, I will have the police here in 5 minutes. And this? I looked him dead in the eye. Becomes obstruction of a probate inquiry. Robert's face went pale. He knew those words. He was trapped. He couldn't physically stop me without proving I was right. He looked at Claire, his grip on her shoulder tightening. Claire, tell her. But Claire was silent, her eyes wide, staring at me as if I were a stranger. I made the call. Yes, I need an emergency lockout service at 124 Pine Street. It's for a small document safe. The next 20 minutes were the most agonizing of my life. The three of us stood in the cramped hallway, a tableau of silent warfare. Robert Hale vibrated with suppressed rage, his mask of friendliness completely gone. My mother just stared at the floor, her hands twisting in the hem of her sweater. The locksmith arrived, a young guy in a jumpsuit, looking confused by the heavy atmosphere. Which lock is it? In here, I said, leading him to my mother's bedroom, to the closet. I pointed to the top shelf, to the gray metal box. That one. He got his stool. Robert and Claire watched from the doorway, like gargoyles guarding a tomb. You sure about this, ma'am? Once I drill this, it's done. I'm sure, I said. The sound of the high-speed drill was deafening in the small room. It shrieked, a metallic scream that was a perfect echo of the tension. After a moment, there was a satisfying click, and the cheap lock fell apart. The locksmith packed his tools, took my cash payment, and fled. I was alone with the two of them. I reached up, my hands perfectly steady, and lifted the box down from the shelf. It was heavy. I placed it on my mother's unmade bed and lifted the lid. No dust, no cobwebs. These papers were handled. The first thing I saw was a stack of official-looking documents. I pulled one out. It was a birth certificate, my birth certificate. I recognized it, but underneath it, there was another one, a duplicate. I held them side by side. The first, the one I knew, listed my name Zoe Jenkins, mother Claire Jenkins, father unknown. The second one was different. It was an older copy. The original, name Zoe Jenkins, mother Claire Gray, grandparental information Walter Gray. You changed your name, I whispered, looking at Claire. You erased him. You erased me. Robert snorted. She protected her family. Shut up, I said, not even looking at him. My hands were shaking now. I dug deeper. Under the certificates was a photograph. It was the same one Arthur had shown me. Claire, young and beautiful, on a boat, holding me as a baby. Behind it, a folded piece of stationery, yellowed with age. It was a letter, in Claire's handwriting. It was addressed to Dad. I'm angry. It read, I hate you for what you did. For choosing the company over us. I'm never coming back. But I'm sending you this picture. Her name is Zoe. I don't want my daughter to pay the price for my pride. She deserves to know you. Maybe someday. It was unsent. My eyes were blurring. She had wanted me to know him. You wrote this, I said, holding it out. Claire wouldn't look at it. It was a long time ago, before I knew what he was capable of. What he was capable of, I spat, turning back to the box. And then I saw the money. Bank statements, dozens of them, from a bank I'd never heard of, in the name of Eastward Trustees LLC, and transfers, regular, monthly transfers, labeled management fee, from Gray Maritime Holdings. The amounts were staggering. 6 figures, every single month, for 10 years. And then I saw a receipt, tucked into the bank statements, a cashier's check, drawn on the Eastward Trustees account. The payee a local luxury car dealership, the date last May, the amount $34,000. The exact price of the brand new convertible Maya had received for her college graduation. The gift. From an old friend of your mother's, Maya had bragged. Someone who believes in me. The blood drained from my face. I looked at Claire. You paid for Maya's car, with my money. It was family money, Claire shrieked. It was for us to keep us safe, to give her a good start. It was my inheritance, I screamed, finally losing control. You stole it from me and you gave it to her. That's enough, Robert Hale snapped, stepping forward. This is a private family matter. This is a felony, I shot back. My hand went to the very bottom of the box. There was one last document, in a thick legal envelope. I tore it open. It wasn't the renunciation of inheritance Arthur had shown me, the one with the shaky, forged signature. This was something different. It was a stack of papers, a durable power of attorney, a medical release, and stapled to the back, a single page titled General Waiver of Future Claims, and at the bottom, a signature, Claire Gray, and below that, a second signature, Zoe Jenkins. The signature was mine. It was shaky, thin, the loop of the Z trailing off. I stared at it, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing, and then I saw the date, stamped at the top by a notary. Oh my God, I whispered. This is from 10 years ago. This is the day I had my appendix out. I flashed back. I was 18, lying in a hospital bed, groggy from anesthesia, my side throbbing. My mother was there, her face a mask of concern. Just sign this, honey. It's for the insurance. Just paperwork so the hospital can get paid. I was dizzy. I signed where she pointed. I looked at Robert. I looked at Claire. I finally understood. You? I looked at my mother. You had me sign this. In the hospital. It was to protect you, she sobbed. And you. I looked at Robert. You attached this waiver. This thing I signed when I was drugged, to a forged renunciation. Didn't you? You made it look like I was signing off, like we both were. Robert's face was purple. He lunged, trying to grab the papers. You have no idea what you're talking about. I snatched them away, clutching them to my chest. Claire collapsed onto the bed, her body racked with sobs. I was so scared. Zoe, I was so scared. She pointed a shaking finger at Robert. He found me. He told me Walter was looking for me, that he was going to take you away. He said he'd use his money to prove I was an unfit mother, living in this town. He said he would take you back to Boston, and I would never see you again. She looked at me, her eyes streaming, pleading. He said this was the only way, to sign the papers, to let him manage the money, to hide us, to keep us safe. He said it was the only way to protect you. I did it to protect you. I looked at this woman, the woman who had made me invisible, the woman who had cut my face from a photograph, who had fed my inheritance to my sister, who had used my own hand to sign away my life. I felt nothing. The space where my love for her had lived was now a cold, hollow void. You were afraid of losing me. My voice was quiet, dead. I thought of the picture on the mantel downstairs, the empty space where my 4-year-old face should have been. Mom, I said, my voice perfectly clear in the silent room. You lost me the day you cut me out of the frame. I began to gather the documents, the birth certificates, the bank statements, the receipt for Maya's car, the unsent letter, and the waiver I had signed in the hospital. I folded them neatly and slid them into the manila envelope Arthur had given me. You can't take those, Robert yelled, his voice cracking. That is private property. These are evidence, I said, I zipped my jacket. Claire was still crying on the bed. A broken, hiccuping sound. Zoe, please, please don't. I walked out of the bedroom, past Robert Hale, who looked like he was about to have a stroke. I walked through the cramped living room, past the mantel with the mutilated photograph. I opened the dented front door and stepped out into the cold, gray air. I didn't look back. I flew back to Boston on the first flight out. A 6 a.m. ghost, fueled by coffee and a cold, clarifying rage. The manila envelope was in my bag, resting against my chest. It wasn't tax papers. It was a decade of high-level fraud, identity theft, and extortion. It was the receipt for my sister's car, paid for with my stolen future. When I walked into Arthur Keene's office, the sun was just hitting the harbor, turning the gray water to steel. I hadn't slept in 48 hours. I placed the envelope on his gleaming mahogany desk. He was there, I said, my voice flat. Robert Hale. He was in the house with her. Arthur didn't look surprised. He simply opened the envelope and began to lay out the documents, one by one, like a surgeon arranging his tools. The 2 birth certificates, one with my grandfather's name, one without, the unsent letter from my mother, the bank statements for Eastward Trustees LLC, and finally, the general waiver I had signed from a hospital bed. He looked at the waiver, his face grim. He used your mother's fear to get her compliance, and your medical vulnerability to get your signature. It's a classic pincer movement. He couldn't trust the forged renunciation alone, so he created a backup. He made you complicit in your own erasure. What do we do? I asked. Arthur looked up. First, Ms. Jenkins, we formalize our agreement. He slid a contract across the desk. This is a legal counsel agreement. It states that Keene and Bell will represent you in the matter of the estate of Walter Gray. Our fee, he tapped a clause, is a contingency. We take 30% of the assets we recover for you. If we recover nothing, you owe us nothing. 30% of $400 million was a number I couldn't comprehend. I looked at his sharp, gray eyes. I'm not selling my soul, Mr. Keene. Good, he said, not smiling. Neither am I. This isn't about the money for me. This is about Walter's legacy and the 40 years I spent protecting it. This contract isn't for me. It's for you. It binds us. From this moment on, you are not an individual. You are our client, and we protect our clients. I signed my name, the same name Robert Hale had tried to strike from the record. Now, Arthur said, pressing a button on his intercom. We build our case, and we move faster than he can. The office transformed into a war room. He brought in 2 other lawyers, a junior associate named Ben who looked like he lived on caffeine, and a senior forensic accountant named Maria. Arthur laid the documents on the conference table. The clock is ticking. Robert knows you have the box. He knows you have the statements. He is going to move, and he is going to move fast. He will try to hide the money. He will try to destroy the records. We have to be faster. He pointed to the bank statements. Maria, the shell company, Eastward Trustees LLC. I want its articles of incorporation, its registered agent, and every bank account associated with it. Now, Maria was already typing. The address listed on the statements. It's a P.O. box in a strip mall in Delaware. Of course it is, Arthur muttered. Check the rental agreement for that P.O. box. I will wager my reputation the name on it is Robert Hale. Next, Arthur turned to Ben. The signatures, the forged Claire Gray renunciation and this hospital waiver from Zoe. He tapped the documents. Get me Dr. Eris. Tell him I have an urgent matter. He is the best forensic handwriting analyst in New England. We will have him compare your mother's known true signature, the one on her old driver's license with the forged renunciation. I want a full analysis of the pressure, the slant, and the ink. The hook on the C will be Robert's undoing. We will also have him analyze Zoe's waiver, comparing it to her normal signature, proving it was signed under physical duress or medication. And the money, I said, my voice quiet. I pushed the receipt for Maya's car across the table. Exactly, Maria said. looking up. These management fees, I want a full trace. We need to prove this money flowed from Gray Maritime to the Shell Corp, to Robert Hale's personal accounts. And this, she held up the receipt. Check the dealership, find the sales record. We connect the money, we prove the motive. We prove he wasn't managing the estate, he was looting it. The next 72 hours were a blur of legal violence. Arthur dictated, and the firm moved like a single, efficient machine. First, we filed the civil suit, Zoe Jenkins vs. Robert Hale and Eastward Trustees, LLC. It was a petition for emergency intervention in the probate of Walter Gray. This, Arthur explained, holding the freshly stamped complaint, is our first shot. It officially puts your name, Zoe Jenkins, into the court record. It makes you real in the eyes of the law. Second, we sent out the preservation notices. They were electronic missiles, sent by courier and certified mail, one to the board of directors at Gray Maritime, one to every bank listed on Robert's fraudulent statements, one to Robert Hale himself, which would be delivered to his home. This legally forbids them from destroying, altering, or moving any document, email, or dollar related to this case, Arthur said, his voice like cold steel. If he shreds a single piece of paper now, it's obstruction of justice. Third, we filed for a temporary restraining order on the assets. We are asking the judge to freeze every account associated with Robert Hale and the trust. Arthur said, we're shutting off the spigot. No more six-figure management fees. No more funding for his defense from your grandfather's money. I was sitting on the leather couch in his office, my head spinning, watching them dismantle my enemy's life. I had been invisible for 28 years, and now I was the center of a legal storm. But a cold, practical thought surfaced. There's a problem, I said, my voice hoarse. Arthur stopped pacing. What? My job. The integrity trigger. My supervisor at Haven Ridge. I told him it was a severe family emergency. I'm due back for my shift. Tonight. If I get fired, if I'm not engaged in self-sufficient labor, does this all fall apart? Does Robert win by default? The room went silent. The other lawyers looked at Arthur. Arthur stared at me, his expression unreadable. Yes, it does. If you are not employed at the moment the judge makes a ruling, the integrity trigger fails. Robert's fraudulent trust would likely be declared the permanent solution. You must go back. Go back. I was stunned. Go back to scrubbing toilets while we're filing a $400 million lawsuit. Especially now, Arthur said, his voice firm. Robert knows about the trigger. It's his only way out. He will absolutely call your employer. He will try to get you fired. He will say you've come into money, that you're lying, that you've abandoned your post, your job. Your $13 an hour custodial job is the single most important piece of this puzzle. It's your entire standing. You must not lose it. I felt a wave of despair, followed by a surge of pure, stubborn anger. So I'm supposed to fight a legal war during the day and scrub toilets at night? Yes, Arthur said simply. I stood up. Okay, then I'll go. I was exhausted, but a cold resolve was settling in. I had been invisible my whole life. I could be invisible for a little longer. I was at the door, my small travel bag in my hand, ready to fly back to the Midwest and punch in for my 10 p.m. shift. Zoe, Arthur said. I turned. He was looking past me, at the nautical charts on his wall. A strange, calculating light was in his eyes. Your job is not a weakness, he said slowly. It's a weapon. What are you talking about? Robert thinks you're hiding. He thinks you're ashamed of that job. He thinks it's your vulnerability. What if we make it the centerpiece? What if we create a public flashpoint, a place where he cannot hide, and we use your job to spring the trap? He walked over to a map, not of the sea, but of the Midwest. Haven Ridge International Airport, he mused. Walter Gray was on the original infrastructure committee that funded that airport. His seed money built Terminal C 30 years ago. My jaw dropped. The terminal I cleaned every night. The place I met Arthur. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a connection. Walter loved logistics, Arthur said, a rare, thin smile touching his lips. Air, sea, land. He loved the work of it. He loved the smell of jet fuel and machine oil. We will use his own legacy against the man who tried to steal it. This was the plan. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. Step 1, Arthur's firm, on behalf of the estate of Walter Gray, would contact the Haven Ridge Airport Authority. We would request permission to set up a temporary memorial exhibit right in the main departures hall of Terminal C. Not a lawsuit, just a historical display. Walter Gray, pioneer of American logistics. It's legal. It's public relations. And airports love this stuff, Arthur said. We have the original donation paperwork. They won't be able to refuse. Step 2. We would invite Robert Hale. The invitation would be formal. From the board of Gray Maritime, which Arthur was already strong-arming, we would invite Robert to speak at the unveiling. He won't be able to resist, Arthur said. A chance to perform, to cement his role as the protector of Walter's legacy. He'll be there in his best suit. He'll see it as a victory lap. Step 3. We would invite the local press, not the national sharks, just the local business reporters. Man who stole 9 figures gets honored, Arthur said. Step 4. The exhibit itself. It would be a history of Gray Maritime, with photos of Walter, and in the center, a large screen. We would prepare a simple looping display, and on that display, a QR code. What does the code do? I asked. By the time of the exhibit, our civil complaint will be unsealed and a matter of public record, Ben, the associate, said, his eyes gleaming. The QR code will link directly to the court docket, to the entire lawsuit, to the forged signatures, the bank statements, the receipt for Maya's car, and the report from Dr. Aris. We'll let him give his entire self-congratulatory speech, and then we'll let the reporters scan the code. My heart was pounding. He'll be ambushed, in public, at my job. He'll be exposed, Arthur corrected, by the truth, in the very terminal your grandfather built, and in the very terminal where you work to honor his integrity trigger. I thought of something. What if he gets suspicious? What if he cancels the event? What if he pulls strings with the airport authority? Arthur smiled, a thin, cold smile. That's plan B. The moment he interferes, the moment he makes a single call to stop this memorial, he proves his guilty mind. He proves he's suppressing information. We file for an emergency injunction based on his interference. And what, Ms. Jenkins, is all over an airport. I understood. Cameras, hundreds of them. They'll be our witnesses. I zipped my bag. I was no longer just the custodial staff. I was bait. I'll see you at the memorial, I said. I have a shift to get to. I walked out of the office, back into the world, but I was a different person. I was no longer the girl with the mop bucket. I was the anchor of a legal heist, and I was going home to set the trap. For the next 4 days, I lived a double life. By night, I was exactly who I had always been. I reported for my 10 p.m. shift at Haven Ridge International. I pushed my mop bucket. I wiped down counters. I scrubbed the floors of Terminal C. The grout lines beneath the fluorescent lights as familiar to me as the lines on my own hand. But I wasn't just cleaning. I was surveying my territory. I was a soldier preparing a battlefield. By day, I was Arthur's weapon. I slept in 2-hour increments in my studio apartment, my phone buzzing on the cheap nightstand. I ignored the frantic, blocked calls from my mother and the unknown numbers I knew were Robert Hale. I lived on black coffee and adrenaline, holding my breath, waiting for the trap to spring. I was the integrity trigger, and I was holding the line. The day of the memorial arrived. It was 10 a.m. on a Friday. The airport was loud, a river of travelers rushing toward their gates, but the main departures hall, the wide-open space in Terminal C, had been sectioned off. The airport authority, just as Arthur had predicted, was thrilled to honor a founding donor, They had set up a small stage with a podium, right in front of the massive digital flight board by Gate 12. A huge, professionally printed banner hung above it, the color of new money and old prestige. Walter Gray, pioneer of American logistics. To the side of the podium, a massive LED screen, the one that usually displayed delays and cancellations, was dark, waiting, and I was there. I was, in fact, scheduled to be. I was wearing my standard issue blue custodial uniform. The patch on the shoulder read, Haven Ridge Maintenance. My plastic name tag was pinned crookedly to my shirt, Zoe. My heavy yellow mop cart, the one with the squeaky left wheel, was parked neatly near the edge of the velvet ropes. It was freshly stocked with spray bottles and clean rags. Next to it stood a secondary microphone on a simple stand, the one meant for technical announcements or quick introductions. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I was invisible. I blended into the infrastructure. The guests began to file in. A few airport executives in crisp suits, a local councilwoman, and a handful of people from the Port Authority. Then, the press. 3 reporters from the local business journal, notebooks out, and a cameraman from the Channel 5 News, Arthur's associate. Ben, posing as a PR consultant for the estate, had leaked a tip about a major philanthropic announcement regarding the airport's future. Arthur Keene arrived last. He was not with the official party. He looked like any other high-value passenger, dressed in an immaculate gray suit, his silver hair combed back. He stood at the edge of the crowd, observing, looking like he was just waiting for a flight to Boston. He caught my eye across the concourse. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Then Robert Hale arrived. He was a vision of manufactured grief and corporate success. His suit was dark blue, his tie a power red. He oozed confidence, his smile wide and practiced as he shook hands with the airport director. He was here to claim his victory, to finally, publicly, cement his role as the savior of the Gray legacy. He glanced in my direction once, his eyes sweeping right past me. Of course they did. I was just the help, cleaning the floor he was about to stand on. The airport director stepped to the podium. He made a brief, warm speech about the history of Haven Ridge and Walter Gray's crucial early investment. The PA system carried his voice over the normal din of the terminal. And now, the director said, it is my great honor to introduce the man who has tirelessly stewarded this incredible legacy for the past decade, a man who truly embodies Mr. Gray's vision, the head of the Eastward Trustees, Mr. Robert Hale. Robert took the podium to polite applause. The news camera was rolling. He placed his hands on either side, leaning in like a trusted, benevolent friend. Thank you, Director, he said, his voice smooth and deep, resonating with false humility. Thank you. When my relative, Walter Gray, passed, he left a tremendous legacy, a legacy of hard work, a legacy of integrity. He said the word integrity without a single trace of irony, and my hand tightened on the handle of my mop cart. My singular mission, for 10 long years, has been to preserve that legacy, to protect it. He was preening. He was basking in the light. He spoke about Gray Maritime's new direction and future community partnerships. He was accepting the credit for my grandfather's entire life, right in the building my grandfather had helped fund. We honor Walter, Robert concluded, by continuing his work, by ensuring his estate is managed with the diligence he would have demanded. We are the guardians of his memory. Thank you, he smiled, waiting for the applause that would confirm his triumph, before a single person could clap. I stepped forward. I moved from my cart to the secondary microphone. The sound system squealed for a half second as I switched it on, a sharp feedback whine that cut through the polite silence. Excuse me. The entire crowd turned, every head. They saw the girl in the blue uniform. Robert Hale froze, his self-satisfied smile locking on his face, his eyes narrowing in annoyance. Who was this janitor? We have a short technical presentation, I said. My voice, the one I usually use to report a spill in Concourse B, echoed through the entire terminal. It was amplified, clear, and steady. Mr. Hale, you spoke of preserving the legacy, I continued. I'm from the airport's logistics team. This was true. I was custodial logistics. We have a brief documentary tribute to Walter Gray. It's only 3 minutes. If you would all please direct your attention to the main screen. Robert looked trapped. He couldn't refuse to honor Walter Gray at his own memorial. He gave a tight, forced nod. Of course, I looked over at Ben, who was standing near the AV booth, disguised as a technician. He hit the button. The massive LED screen flickered to life. It did not show a corporate video. It showed a single, scanned document, blown up to fill the 20-foot screen. It was a close-up of a handwritten letter, in thick, black ink. Walter Gray's real, powerful handwriting. Next to the photograph of my mother holding me on the boat, it was the unsent letter I'd found in the gray box. This, I said into the microphone, my voice shaking slightly but holding firm, is correspondence from Walter Gray's personal file regarding his daughter, Claire, and his granddaughter, his known granddaughter. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Robert's face went from tan to a pale, sickly white. The screen changed. Now, it was a split image. On the left, a document labeled True Signature Claire Gray. It was her real, confident signature from her old driver's license. On the right, a document labeled Filed Renunciation. It was the forgery. Arthur's forensic expert had added bright red circles, blown up for all to see. As you can see, I said, my voice growing colder. The official Claire Gray signature used to divert the estate shows a distinct tremor, a forged hook on the letter C, which our expert has identified as indicative of a fraudulent imitation, an imitation used to erase the family line. The murmur grew louder. The reporters were scribbling furiously. "Robert, what is this?" the airport director whispered. Horrified, leaning toward the podium, Robert didn't answer. He was staring at the screen as it changed one last time. It was a simple, stark white background. In the center, a large, black QR code. "For full transparency," I said, my voice ringing out, "we have prepared the complete documentation. This includes the bank statements from the fraudulent shell company, Eastward Trustees, LLC. It includes the proof of funds transferred from the estate directly to Mr. Hale. It includes the receipt for a $34,000 luxury car, paid for by those management fees." The reporters were already holding up their phones, their cameras focusing on the code. I saw the moment they connected. Their eyes widened. "And," I continued, "it includes the full civil complaint, Zoe Jenkins versus Robert Hale, filed this morning with the Massachusetts Probate Court. You can check the timestamp. It went live exactly. Now." Robert Hale lost it. The mask of the grieving, benevolent nephew shattered. "This is slander," he roared. He lunged away from the podium, not toward the screen, but toward me. He was making a grab for my microphone. "Turn this off. Security. This is a private event. This is a lie. She's just a janitor." He never touched me. Before his hand was within a foot of the microphone, 2 uniformed Haven Ridge Airport security officers stepped in. They didn't grab him. They didn't tackle him. They simply put themselves between him and me, 2 solid blue walls. "Sir," one said, his voice calm but firm, his hand resting on his belt, "we need you to remain calm. You are in a secure public area." The news camera was flashing, capturing every second. Robert, trapped between security and the evidence, looked like a cornered animal, his face purple with rage. Then, one of the reporters, a woman from the Business Journal whose phone was still lit up from the QR code, raised her hand. She didn't wait to be called on. "Mr. Hale," she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. "A quick question. The address listed for Eastward Trustees, LLC, the shell company, isn't that the same P.O. box as your personal consulting firm?" It was a devastating surgical strike, Robert stammered. That's a clerical. This is a misunderstanding. I was protecting the estate." He looked desperate, searching the crowd for an ally, for someone to stop this. His eyes found Arthur Keene, who was now standing at the front. Arthur stepped forward, his hands in his pockets, his expression one of mild, professional disappointment. "Robert," he said, his voice carrying easily, "I'm afraid it's too late for that." He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "As legal counsel for the plaintiff, Ms. Zoe Jenkins, I am serving you with this notice." He didn't hand it to Robert. He handed it to one of the security officers. "As of 10 minutes ago, a Massachusetts judge has granted our temporary restraining order. All assets held by Eastward trustees, Gray Maritime, and your personal accounts are frozen." Robert looked like he had been shot. The blood left his face. He was trapped, publicly humiliated, and worst of all, cut off from the money. All eyes in the terminal, the guests, the reporters, the security were on me, the janitor, the ghost who had just claimed the entire estate. Robert stared at me, his eyes burning with a hatred that was terrifying. "You? Who are you?" I leaned into the microphone. I looked at the cameras. I looked at Arthur. I looked at the frozen, ruined face of the man who had erased me. I said the 8 words that gave me back my life. The granddaughter never refused the grandfather, and I have learned that a courtroom is just like an airport. It is a non-place, a sterile box of terrazzo floors and fluorescent lighting, where the only thing that matters is what is written on the schedule. The memorial explosion had been public. The probate court hearing, 1 week later, was a silent, pressurized procedure in a small, wood-paneled room in Boston that smelled like old paper and floor wax. There was no audience. There was only the judge, a severe woman named Judge Marion Shaw. There was Arthur Keene and his team, and across the room, Robert Hale, looking gray and diminished, with his high-priced lawyer. A man named Scanlon. The air was tight, unbreathable. "We are here," Judge Shaw began, her voice flat, "to address the emergency petition filed by one Zoe Jenkins, claiming to be the primary and sole heir to the estate of Walter Gray. The estate is currently under the management of Mr. Robert Hale, Mr. Scanlon. Your client's response to this petition." Scanlon, a man with a face like a clenched fist, stood up. He was holding a document. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Hale, has acted with nothing but integrity. The petition from Ms. Jenkins is not just false. It is a malicious, opportunistic fraud." "Those are strong words." "Mr. Scanlon," the judge said, raising an eyebrow. "They are accurate words. Your Honor, the petitioner claims she was erased. The petitioner claims she was unaware of her inheritance. We submit this." He handed a document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Arthur leaned forward, straining to see it. "This, Your Honor," Scanlon announced, his voice booming with false confidence, "is a revocation of renunciation signed by Ms. Zoe Jenkins herself, dated just 4 weeks ago, mere days after her grandfather's death. It seems Ms. Jenkins was perfectly aware of her status. It seems she was, in fact, attempting to revoke a disinheritance she had previously agreed to. This whole story, this janitor in the airport routine, is a performance, a lie to gain the court's sympathy after her attempt to reclaim the money failed." I felt the blood drain from my face. A new forgery, a new lie, designed to make me look like a co-conspirator who was now betraying her partner. Robert was trying to pull me into the mud with him. The judge looked at the document, then at me. "Ms. Jenkins, this is your signature." Arthur Keene stood up. "Your Honor, if I may, we anticipated Mr. Hale's desperation. Though I admit, this level of creative fiction is new. I would like to call our first witness, Dr. Elias Aris, forensic document examiner." Dr. Aris was a small, precise man in a bow tie. He took the stand. Arthur handed him the new, fraudulent document. "Dr. Aris, you have examined the known true signatures of my client, Ms. Zoe Jenkins. I have, extensively, and you have examined this revocation." Dr. Aris adjusted his glasses, He looked at the signature, then at the judge. I did. It is a fascinatingly poor forgery. The signatory of this revocation is attempting to imitate the script of a left-handed person. The slant is inverted. The pressure on the upstroke is unnaturally heavy, and the O in Zoe is formed counterclockwise. It's a clumsy attempt to create noise to obscure the facts. And why is that relevant, Doctor? Arthur asked, his voice smooth. It is relevant, Dr. Aris said, because Ms. Zoe Jenkins is, and has been her entire life, demonstrably right-handed. The signature on this document is no more hers than the Claire Gray renunciation was her mother's. A flicker of annoyance crossed Judge Shaw's face. She looked at Scanlon. Counselor, do you wish to cross-examine this witness, or would you prefer to retract this? Noise. Scanlon, his face flushing, muttered, No further questions. The first lie was dead, but I knew this was just the beginning. The court, Judge Shaw said, is deeply concerned about the original renunciation. We have the experts report that the signature of Claire Gray is a forgery. We have bank statements showing a decade of payments to a shell corporation. We have a $34,000 automobile. She glared at Robert. Before I hear from Mr. Hale, I want to hear from the person at the center of this. I want to hear from Ms. Claire Gray. The courtroom doors opened. My mother shuffled in. She was a ghost. She looked 20 years older than she had in her living room. Her hair was thin, her face pale and puffy. She wasn't with Robert. She was with a new lawyer, a man in a rumpled suit who looked like he was being paid by the hour. Her lawyer stood, Your Honor, my client, Ms. Claire Gray, is here today not as a witness, but as a mother. She is distraught. This entire affair is a tragic family misunderstanding. She believes this matter has been blown dangerously out of proportion by outside counsel. He shot a venomous look at Arthur. She is here to formally request that this court stay the proceedings and allow for a private family reconciliation. He was trying to shut it down, to pull it out of the light, to bury it again. My mother looked at me. Her eyes were red, pleading, Zoe, please, stop this. Judge Shaw turned her severe gaze on me. Ms. Jenkins, your mother is requesting reconciliation. This is probate, not a criminal trial. What is your response? I saw her. The woman who cut my face from the photograph. The woman who stood by while Robert Hale told me to my face that I had no legal rights. The woman who had me sign a waiver in a hospital bed. I stood up. My hands were steady. My voice was clear. No, Your Honor, I do not wish to reconcile. I wish to proceed. My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. And before my mother testifies, I continued, I request that the court read aloud Section 4, Clause B of Walter Gray's last will and testament. It is the entire basis for my standing in this room. The judge looked at Arthur, who nodded. It is the central point of our petition, Your Honor. Judge Shaw shuffled through the will. She found the page. She began to read the words that had changed my life. It is my express demand, she read, her voice echoing in the silent room, that the primary beneficiary of my estate must be engaged in verifiable, self-sufficient labor, independent of any family trust or privilege, for a period no less than 12 consecutive months prior to my passing. Should this integrity trigger not be met, the estate is to be managed by... She looked up. The rest is redacted, pending this hearing. Self-sufficient labor. She looked at me, her face a mask of judicial skepticism. Ms. Jenkins, the opposition, in their initial filing, has painted you as, let us be blunt, an opportunist, a parasite, someone who, upon learning of this clause, fabricated a work history. We anticipated this line of attack, Your Honor, Arthur said, standing. He was holding a thick, 3-ring binder, the kind I used to use for inventory management. We submit into evidence Exhibit D, Arthur announced. These are Ms. Jenkins's complete, time-stamped pay stubs from Haven Ridge International Airport, dating back 36 months, As you can see, she was employed full-time, graveyard shift, clocking in at 10 p.m., 5 nights a week. He placed the binder on the judge's bench. We also submit Exhibit E, her federal tax returns for the past 3 years, showing an adjusted gross income of approximately $26,000 per year. And finally, Exhibit F, her bank statements for the same period, showing her rent payments, her utility bills, and her student loan payments. Ms. Jenkins was not living on privilege, Your Honor. She was surviving. The pay stubs, the tax returns, the $13 an hour proof. It was a wall of truth that Robert Hale could not climb. The parasite narrative had just evaporated. Judge Shaw looked through the binder, her expression hardening. She looked up, past me, at Robert Hale. Mr. Hale, stand? Robert stood, his tailored suit suddenly looking too large for him. The court, Judge Shaw said, her voice dripping with ice, has reviewed your management fees, 6 figures, monthly, for 10 years, while the true, legally verifiable heir, the working heir, was scrubbing floors for $26,000 a year in a terminal your trust was supposedly managing. How do you explain this grotesque discrepancy? Robert stammered. Your Honor, the estate, it was complex. It required active, high-level oversight. I was protecting the assets. The market was volatile. Protecting them, the judge cut him off. Or liquidating them for your own use. Can you justify, Mr. Hale, a single $34,000 expenditure from the trust for a luxury automobile? Was that volatile? That was a corporate expense, an investment, for transport. He was drowning. He had no answer. The silence in the room was damning. Your Honor, if I may, Arthur said, stepping forward. We have one final piece of evidence, procured from the server of Eastward Trustees, LLC, via this court's own subpoena, an email from Robert Hale to his personal accountant, dated 10 years ago, just 2 days after the fraudulent renunciation was filed. He didn't need a projector. He just handed the printout to the judge. Judge Shaw read it. Her face, which had been stern, turned to cold fury. She read it aloud. The Claire situation is handled. The assets are secure. Just remember to keep the girl off the record entirely. She doesn't exist. The judge put the paper down. She stared at Robert Hale. She doesn't exist. Robert's lawyer, Scanlon, saw the case evaporating. He saw his client about to be referred for criminal charges. He stood up, a desperate, last-ditch effort. Your Honor, this is character assassination. This is all a tragic misreading of the situation. The reason Mr. Hale had to step in, the reason he had to protect the estate, was because Walter Gray had disowned his daughter. He wanted nothing to do with Claire. He found her unfit, unstable. Mr. Hale was simply honoring his relatives' true wishes. It was their final move, to paint my mother as a disgrace, to paint Walter as a cold monster, and to paint Robert as the loyal soldier. Arthur Keene stood slowly. He looked, for the first time, genuinely sad. Mr. Scanlon, Arthur said, his voice quiet but carrying. That is a grievous and despicable lie. Walter Gray never, ever disowned his daughter. He spent the last 20 years of his life hoping she would return. He reached into his own briefcase. He pulled out a single sheet of old, heavy, cream-colored stationery. This, Your Honor, Arthur said, is a letter, from Walter to Claire, written 1 year after she left him. It was found in the private drawer of his desk. It was unsent, because he no longer had an address for her. I was his executor. I found it. I asked the court's permission to read it. The judge nodded. Arthur read. His voice was not the voice of a lawyer. It was the voice of a man reading a eulogy for his friend. My dearest Claire, the house is empty. The company is nothing. I was wrong. My pride was wrong. Whatever you did, wherever you are, when you want to come back, the table is waiting. Your chair is still here. Always. A sound shattered the silence of the courtroom. It was not a sob, it was a wail. It was my mother. Claire was on her feet, her entire body shaking, her own lawyer trying to pull her back down. He told me, she shrieked, and she pointed a trembling, skeletal finger across the room at Robert Hale. He told me Walter hated me. He said he'd ruin me. He said he'd take Zoe. He said he would prove I was an unfit mother and take my baby. Your Honor, Scanlon shouted. The witness is hysterical. I signed them, she screamed, her voice cracking. I signed the papers he gave me, the medical forms, the power of attorney. I signed them because I was scared, but not that one. Her eyes were wild. Not the renunciation, that wasn't me. That was you. You did that. She had just confessed. She admitted her complicity in the other documents, the leverage Robert had used, but she had, under oath, confirmed the central forgery. She had confirmed the entire conspiracy. The courtroom was in chaos. The judge was banging her gavel. Order, order. My mother turned to me. Her face was a ruin of tears and makeup. Zoe, baby, please, it was a mistake. I was so scared. Please, forgive me. We can fix this. We're family. Please. I stood up. The room went quiet again. I looked at her. The woman who had cut me from the frame. The woman who had let me scrub toilets for a decade while she and my sister spent my inheritance. I felt nothing. Just a cold, clean, empty space. No, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the entire room. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, the truth is the only thing I ever needed her to sign, and she just did, under oath. Judge Shaw stared at me. She stared at Robert, who was ashen-faced, a dead man in a suit. She stared at the mountain of evidence, the pay stubs, the forgeries, the email, the confession. She slammed her gavel. Silence. Silence in this court. She looked exhausted, and she looked furious. The court has heard enough. This is the most complex, and frankly, the most disturbing probate matter I have seen in 20 years. She stood. I am placing this hearing in recess for 24 hours to conduct a final review of all submitted evidence. We will reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. for a final ruling. She banged the gavel one last time. The tension didn't break. It just got wound tighter. 24 hours. 24 hours until my old life was either buried for good, or my new one finally began. The 24-hour recess was a new kind of prison. The courtroom had been a sterile pressure cooker, but the silence of the hotel room Arthur had booked for me was worse. It was a void. We had them. We had the forgeries. We had the bank statements. We had my mother's screaming, tearful, public confession. We had won. But it felt incomplete. I was sitting on a bed that cost more per night than my weekly paycheck, staring at the Boston skyline. Arthur was pacing by the window, his suit jacket off, his tie loosened. He had not stopped moving since we left the courthouse. It's not enough, he said, speaking to the glass. Arthur, she confessed, I said, my voice hoarse. Robert is finished. The judge looked like she wanted to personally send him to jail. She confessed to being coerced, Arthur shot back, turning. She confirmed the forgery, but Scanlon's defense, that Robert was honoring Walter's true wish to disown Claire, still has traction. Robert will appeal. He will claim he was a loyal nephew, protecting the estate from a disgraced daughter, and that his methods, while unorthodox, were in Walter's best interests. He will paint us as the opportunists, using a technicality, the integrity trigger, to undo Walter's wishes. The judge will rule for us, but the appeals could tie this up for years. For a decade, he'll bleed the estate dry fighting us. He stopped pacing. We need something final. We need a document from Walter himself, not a sentimental letter, but a legal instrument, something that proves he knew Robert was a liar and that he specifically wanted you. We're missing the final anchor. I had nothing, We had the gray box. We had the office files. What else was there? Arthur was quiet. His eyes unfocused, looking past me, into a memory. Walter was the most paranoid man I ever knew, he whispered. He trusted his logistics, but he never trusted his family. Not after Robert's father tried an internal takeover in 1985. He was meticulous. He had duplicates of everything. He had contingency plans for his contingency plans. He looked at me, his eyes suddenly sharp. You told me, when we first met, that your mother taught you to be quiet and remember everything. Yes, I said. Walter was the same. He had a phrase. If you want to truly hide something, he'd say, don't put it in a vault. Put it where everyone looks but no one sees. Put it in a place everyone hates, but demands must be clean. My breath caught. I knew that place. It was my whole life. A bathroom, I said. A slow smile spread across Arthur's face. A bathroom. He used to keep a spare key to his private safe taped under the sink in the executive washroom. I told him he was insane. He said, no one looks under a sink, Arthur. They only complain if it's not clean. He stepped toward me. Zoe, Haven Ridge. He didn't just fund it. He designed the utility layout for Terminal C. He was obsessed with it. He flew out 3 times a week for 6 months. He would have known its bones. What if he left something? I whispered. What if the integrity trigger wasn't just a clause in a will? What if it was a map? I was already on my feet. The judge recessed for 24 hours. I'm still an employee at Haven Ridge. My ID card is in my wallet. Go, Arthur said, his voice urgent. I'll arrange a flight. Go back. Look where you've always looked. Not as an heir, as staff. The flight back to the Midwest was a blur. I landed at Haven Ridge International at 7 p.m. The airport was roaring, thick with the Friday night rush. I didn't go to my apartment. I walked from my gate, through the crowded concourse, and straight into the employee locker room. My blue uniform was exactly where I'd left it, hanging on the hook, still smelling faintly of bleach. I put it on. I pinned my Zoe name tag to my shirt. I felt my skin settle. I wasn't the plaintiff. I wasn't the granddaughter. I was custodial. I was home. I grabbed my utility cart, the one I hadn't pushed in what felt like a lifetime. The left wheel still squeaked, but I didn't go to Terminal C. Terminal C was international. It was new. It was the prestige terminal he'd funded. A place everyone hates. The domestic terminal, Terminal A, the old one, the one with the peeling paint and the flickering lights and the bathrooms that always smelled like mildew and despair. The one I hated cleaning. I pushed my cart into the terminal, a domestic arrivals bathroom. It was empty, thank God. The whine of the hand dryer by the door was high-pitched and annoying. The floor was filthy. I looked around. I was the person who scrubbed this toilet. I was the person who refilled that soap dispenser. If he hid something for me, he hid it for me. I went to the last stall. I knelt, the familiar cold of the tile seeping through my pants. I ran my hand under the toilet paper dispenser. Nothing but dust and sticky. Spilled soda. I moved to the sinks. I ran my fingers along the pipes underneath, just as Arthur had said. Nothing, just grime and cobwebs. I stood up, my heart sinking. This was stupid. It was a long shot, a fantasy. I went to the main paper towel dispenser. It was a huge, stainless steel rectangle, bolted to the wall. I pulled a towel, wiped my hands. I was just about to give up. Put it where everyone looks but no one sees. I didn't look at it. I looked behind it. I put my face against the wall, angling my head, looking at the tiny half-inch gap between the steel box and the tile. And I saw it, a small, dark square, wedged against the mounting bracket. It wasn't dust. It was black electrical tape. My heart stopped. My hands were shaking. I forced my fingers into the gap. My nails scraped against the tile. But I got a purchase on the tape. I pulled. It came free with a small, ripping sound. It was a Ziploc bag, heavy duty, wrapped completely in tape. It was heavy. I tore it open. My hands were slick with sweat. Inside was not a letter. It was 2 items, a small, strange, cylindrical key, the kind I'd never seen before, and an old, blue and white plastic card. It looked like a credit card, but it was thick, rigid. The front read, Gray Maritime Technical Services. I knew this card. I'd seen it 100 times. I ran out of the bathroom, pushing my squeaking card in front of me. I went down the hall, past the gate agents, and used my own master key to open the door marked Utility and Engineering, Staff Only. The hallway behind it was gray cinder block. I passed the electrical panels. I passed the janitorial supply closet. And I came to a bank of old gray metal lockers, but one was different. It wasn't a standard locker. It was a small, square, reinforced box set into the wall, labeled Engineering Technical Data. I'd always assumed it held fiber optic routers, and on the front, there was a small, cylindrical keyhole. I looked at the key in my hand. I looked at the lock. My heart was a drum against my ribs. I slid the key in. It was a perfect fit. I turned it. A heavy, satisfying clack echoed in the cinder block hall. The door swung open. It wasn't a router. It was a small, fireproof strongbox, the size of a shoebox. I lifted it out. It was heavy. I opened the latch. Inside, resting on black velvet, was a silver USB hard drive and a single, folded piece of thick, cream-colored stationery, identical to the letter Arthur had read in court. I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was the same, strong, black, impatient, but it wasn't addressed to Claire. It was addressed to the granddaughter I haven't named. I read it, my vision blurring. If you are reading this, it began, it means 2 things. 1, I am gone. 2, you are exactly the person I was hoping for. You did not find this because I told you where it was. You found this because you belong where this is hidden. You are not a guest here. You are staff. You are a worker. That is the true key. This drive is the truth. Do not trust the lawyers, not even Keene. He's a good man, but he's a talker. Trust the work. Trust the files. Your name is in the files. I grabbed the drive and the letter. I put the box back. I locked the panel. I flew back to Boston on the red-eye. I didn't sleep. I didn't even blink. I walked into Arthur's hotel suite at 5 a.m. He was sitting in the dark, in his chair, waiting. I didn't say a word. I just walked to the desk, pulled out my laptop, and plugged in the USB drive. Zoe, he breathed. What is that? It's the anchor, I said. The drive mounted. It was called Integrity. It had 3 folders. The first folder was Shareholders Real. I clicked it. It was a single PDF. The original, scanned. Notarized founding charter for Gray Maritime Logistics. Arthur read it over my shoulder, and his breath hitched. The beneficiary structure was spelled out. Clause 1, Claire Gray. Clause 2. In the event of Claire's renunciation or death, the inheritance shall pass directly and without interference to the verified living issue of Claire Gray. It wasn't a loophole. It wasn't a secondary claim. I was the designated heir. Robert's trust. The temporary management. It wasn't just fraud. It was a legal impossibility. The second folder was Haven Ridge. It was full of Walter's personal journal scans from 30 years ago. He wrote about the airport. The unions are tough, but the location is perfect. A hub for the heartland. Logistics is the blood of the country, and this is the new aorta. He hadn't just funded it, he'd loved it. The third folder was personal. My hand was shaking. I clicked it. It was full of scans. The first was a series of receipts, tuition payments, to my mother's state university, every semester, for 4 years, paid in full, in the memo line of each from W. G, just finish. He had never, ever abandoned her. The second file was a photograph, not the one on the boat. This was one I had never seen. It was Claire, younger, vibrant, sitting on a wooden pallet, and she was inside a massive airplane, a cargo plane. The Gray Maritime logo, a stylized G, was stenciled on the bulkhead behind her, and in her lap, she was holding me, a baby, wrapped in a blanket. She was looking at me, and her smile. It was the smile from the boat photo. Pure, unguarded joy. This was our real family portrait. The last file was a video. Just one, 30 seconds long. It was just called Hello, MP4. I clicked it. The screen flickered, and suddenly, he was there. Walter Gray. His hair was silver white. His face was a roadmap of lines. And his eyes? They were my eyes. Sharp, assessing. They weren't looking at a camera. They were looking at me. He was in his office. He leaned forward. "If you found this," he said, his voice a low, powerful gravel, "it means you're doing real work. It means you're not afraid to get your hands dirty. It means you're not one of them." He spat the word. "The soft ones. The takers. You're a Gray. This trigger. This whole plan. It wasn't a test. It was a hello. Now, go to work." The video ended. The sun was coming up over Boston. The room was silent, save for the hum of the laptop. I was crying, but they weren't the tears of a girl who had been erased. They were the tears of a girl who had just been found. I closed the laptop. I picked up the hard drive and the letter. "Arthur," I said, my voice thick, "we need to log this into evidence. We need to follow the chain of custody." I placed the items in a new, official evidence bag from his briefcase. I sealed it. I signed my name across the seal, and I wrote the date and the time. The integrity trigger. It wasn't a hoop he made me jump through. It wasn't a test to see if I was worthy. He knew, somehow he knew, that a person of value would already be working. He wasn't testing me, he was finding me. And he had hidden the key in the one place in the world only I would ever think to look. The judge's recess was not a pause. It was the starting gun for the final, frantic sprint. We had 24 hours until the ruling, and Arthur Keene did not intend to waste a single second. We didn't go back to the hotel. We went straight to the courthouse records office. It was 6 p.m., and Arthur had forced a clerk to stay late. We were filing an emergency motion to submit new, dispositive evidence. The evidence: one silver USB hard drive. Designation: integrity. "This drive, Your Honor," Arthur dictated to the motion, "was recovered by Ms. Jenkins from a secure lockbox established by Walter Gray himself. It was a failsafe, accessible only by the heir who fulfilled the integrity trigger. It is, in effect, Walter Gray's final, binding instruction." We submitted the drive. We submitted the scanned charter proving I was the designated heir. We submitted the transcripts of Walter's journal. We submitted the 30-second video of my grandfather looking me in the eye, and we attached a digital certificate. "The drive has been verified," Arthur explained to me, his voice low and satisfied. "A full SHA-256 hash. It's a digital fingerprint. It proves, cryptographically, that its contents have not been altered one bit since Walter Gray last saved them, likely years before his death. Robert cannot claim we faked this." "He'll try," I said, my voice numb with exhaustion. "Which is why we make our next move," Arthur said. We stood on the cold marble steps of the courthouse. The city lights were coming on. In light of Mr. Hale's documented attempts to smear my client, Arthur filed a secondary motion, and his clear pattern of witness tampering and intimidation. We petitioned the court to immediately unseal this new evidence. We ask for protection through transparency. Let the public see the truth before Mr. Hale has time to spin a new lie. The judge, clearly as furious as we were, approved the motion within an hour. The video of Walter Gray, the corporate charter, the photo of me and my mother in the cargo plane, they were now all part of the public record. We had just detonated our final bomb. Robert Hale's reaction was immediate and desperate. He couldn't fight us in court anymore. We had an irrefutable legal anchor. So he fought us in the one place he had left the gutter. By 10 p.m., the first smear article hit the web. It was a sleazy online tabloid. The headline was crimson: "Airport Janitor's $400 million Hoax." Ben, Arthur's associate, read it aloud in the hotel war room, his voice dripping with disgust. "Sources close to the family claim Zoe Jenkins, a disgruntled relative, orchestrated an elaborate scheme. leveraging a minor custodial job, a clear case of elder fraud and gold digging. He's painting me as a con artist, I whispered, feeling sick. Of course he is, Arthur snapped. It's his only move. He's trying to poison the judge's mind, to create public doubt. He looked at Ben. It's time. Release the binder. Which one? Ben asked. Exhibit E, Arthur said. The pay stubs, the tax returns, the student loan bills. Send the entire file to the Boston Globe, the Wall Street Journal, and every local reporter who ran that gold digger trash. Let's see them write a story about a gold digger who worked 60 hours a week for $13 an hour and paid 34% of her income in taxes. Counter his fiction with our facts. The information war had begun. The next morning, 8 hours before the ruling, my phone rang, a block number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but a feeling in my gut made me answer. Zoe. My blood froze. It was my mother. Her voice was a dry, broken rasp. Zoe, please, I have to see you. Before the court, not the lawyers. Just us. Please, I have to give you something. I looked at Arthur. He was watching me. I thought of Robert. I thought of the setup. Where? I asked, my voice cold. Anywhere, she cried. A coffee shop. A park? Haven Ridge Airport, I said. Terminal C? The security checkpoint? Public side? 7 a.m. Be there. The airport. Why? Because I trust the cameras, I said, and hung up. I flew back. The 2-hour flight felt like a lifetime. I stood by the TSA line, in my civilian clothes, watching travelers dump their water bottles and take off their shoes. I felt like a ghost, haunting the place where my life had shattered and been rebuilt. Claire arrived. She looked like she had aged 30 years in 2 weeks. Her face was a ruin, her eyes swollen and red. She wasn't carrying a purse, just a single, folded envelope. Zoe, she whispered. She looked around at the crowds, the TSA agents, the cameras in the ceiling. You were smart to pick here. What do you want? Mom? She tried to reach for my hand. I pulled it back. She faltered. I'm going to tell the truth today. In court, I'm going to tell them everything. About Robert, about the threats, about the car. Good, I said. He lied about everything. She was weeping now, fat tears rolling down her pale cheeks. Walter, your grandfather, he did send letters. Robert must have intercepted most of them, but I found this one, years ago, tucked into an old book. Robert doesn't know I have it. He told me Walter hated me, that he'd forgotten me. She pushed the envelope into my hand. It was the same cream-colored stationery as Walter's. It had been opened and refolded 100 times. I read it. It was dated 5 years after she left. It wasn't the unsent letter from his desk. This one had been mailed. This one had gotten through. Claire, it read, stop this. Stop punishing yourself. And stop punishing me. Whatever you think I did, it's not worth this silence. The table is waiting. Just come home. Bring my granddaughter home. She had known. She had known he wanted her back. And she had still let Robert Hale convince her he was the enemy. Her fear and her shame had been a stronger prison than any lie Robert could tell. I was a coward, Zoe, she whispered. I was so ashamed of what I'd done, of how I'd failed. I couldn't go back. And then it was just too late. I folded the letter. I put it in my pocket. I don't need your apology in court, I said, my voice flat. I don't need you to cry. I need you to get on the stand, look the judge in the eye, and for the first time in my entire life, just tell the truth. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone by the metal detectors. I got back to Boston at 9 a.m. 1 hour to go. The war room was buzzing. You're not going to believe this, Ben said, not even looking up from his phone. Robert has been busy. What, another smear piece? Worse, he's tampering with a witness, or trying to. He looked at me, his face pale. He called your sister, Maya? I felt a jolt of cold. What? She called here, hysterical. About 20 minutes ago, Robert found her at her university. He told her she was implicated. He told her the money for her car, her tuition. It was receiving stolen property. He said she was a legal accessory to the fraud. My God, he was using her. He was using the car. He gave her a choice, Ben said, his voice hard. She either contacts you and convinces you to drop the suit, or he makes sure she's indicted as a co-conspirator. He's trying to use your sister to break you. Where is she? Is she okay? She's terrified, Arthur said, stepping in. I spoke with her. She's a flight risk. But she's more scared of Robert than she is of us. She's furious. He held up his phone. And she was smart. She agreed to give a full statement, over the phone, with her consent for the call to be recorded for her own protection. We have him. We have him on witness intimidation, felony coercion. We have it all. It's already been filed with the judge's clerk. The final nail. The phone on the conference table rang. It was a formal, sterile chime. Ben looked at the caller ID. It's Scanlon's office. Robert Hale's lawyer. Arthur muted his own cell phone and picked up the conference call. Arthur Keene. Scanlon's voice was no longer the arrogant boom from the courtroom. It was a thin, reedy hiss. Arthur, I'm calling as a courtesy. My client has recognized the emotional toll of this family dispute. He is prepared to be reasonable. He will concede the fraudulent renunciation. He will step down, immediately, from the trust. Arthur was silent. He just waited. In exchange, Scanlon continued, Ms. Jenkins agrees to a full and permanent non-disclosure agreement. The estate is to be split, 50-50. She gets her half. Mr. Hale retains the assets he has. Managed to this point. We cancel today's hearing. No criminal referrals. It's a clean walkaway. She's a very rich woman. Today. $200 million. Guaranteed. No more fighting. No more court. No more pain. Arthur looked at me. It was my choice. I thought of the video. Go to work. I thought of my mother, broken, at the airport. Away. I thought of Maya, crying, being threatened by the man who had bought her silence with my money. No, I said. Arthur unmuted the phone. 50-50. That's quite an offer, counselor. A bit rich, considering your client is facing decades in federal prison for fraud and witness tampering. Arthur, don't play. Tell him no, I said, my voice loud and clear, carrying across the speaker. I don't want a deal. I don't want a settlement. I want a ruling. I want my name back on the paper. I want the world to know what he did. We'll see you in court. I hit the end call button myself. The silence that followed was heavy. He's got one last move, Arthur said. He's trapped. He's going to do something stupid. He was right. Ben, who had been monitoring the web, suddenly let out a low whistle. Arthur, Zoe, you have to see this. He's already done it. He spun his laptop around. It was the Haven Ridge International Airport website. And the main digital display boards in the terminal, Robert, in a final act of blistering arrogance, had used the estate's money to buy a massive advertising campaign. It was slick, corporate, and live right now. A picture of the gray maritime logo, superimposed over a shining runway. The text, Gray Logistics, History is Returning, a new era of management, a promise kept. I stared. He's trying to pretend he won. He's creating a public narrative that he is the new management. He's trying to preempt the judge. Arthur Keene laughed, a real, sharp bark of a laugh. The arrogance he thinks he can fool the market. He thinks he can spin this. His smile turned cold and sharp. He's just handed us Exhibit H, Zoe. He is actively, right now, misrepresenting the estate's status in a public forum. He's violating the temporary restraining order that froze his control. He's committing securities fraud in real time. He picked up his phone. Get me the judge's clerk, now. The countdown was over. It was 9:30 a.m. I couldn't sit in the war room. I couldn't breathe. I left. I went downstairs, out onto the cold Boston street, and just walked. I ended up in a small park, staring at a dirty fountain. 10 minutes. I thought about my old life, the smell of bleach, the squeak of the wheel, the crushing invisibility, and I thought about the night before. I had been in the hotel. I couldn't sleep. The hearing was in 12 hours. I had, without thinking, booked a ticket, the red-eye. I landed at Haven Ridge at 1 a.m. Frank, my old supervisor, saw me by the lockers. Zoe, my God, what are you doing here? You're all over the news. You're not on the schedule. Just needed to be here. Frank. I'd said. I didn't change. I just walked. I walked to the Terminal C bathroom, the place where my old life had ended. It was 3 a.m. The terminal was silent. The mirror over the sinks was filthy, streaked with water spots and poi, something that looked like ketchup. I looked at my reflection, the girl in the dirty glass, tired, scared, but there, my eyes looked back at me. They were Walter Gray's eyes. I went to my old utility cart, still parked in the alcove. I picked up the bottle of glass cleaner. I grabbed a clean cloth. Habit. I started wiping the mirror, the familiar, circular motion, wiping away the grime, wiping away the streaks. With every wipe, my own face became clearer, sharper. The girl who was cut from the frame, the invisible daughter, the janitor, she was gone. The glass was clean. The woman in the reflection was not. She was a fighter. She was the granddaughter. She was the integrity trigger. And she was ready. I looked at my watch. 10 a.m. It was time. The final day. 10 a.m. The courtroom was no longer the quiet, pressurized box it had been yesterday. It was packed. The memorial at the airport, my viral pay stubs, and Arthur's motion to unseal the evidence had turned this from a private probate dispute into a public execution. Because the Gray estate was tied to public infrastructure, the airport Judge Shaw had authorized a local, closed-circuit broadcast. The press was here. The public was watching. Robert Hale was already at his table, his face a mask of gray wax. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. He looked like a man who had seen his future, and it was a jail cell. My mother, Claire, sat in the front row, behind her rumpled lawyer. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring straight ahead, her hands clenched in her lap. Judge Shaw entered, her robes sweeping. She did not waste time. "We are here for the final ruling in the matter of the estate of Walter Gray," she announced, her voice booming in the crowded room. "Before I issue that ruling, this court has reviewed the emergency evidence submitted by the petitioner at 6 p.m. last night. This evidence, recovered from a secure failsafe established by Mr. Gray himself, is deemed dispositive. Mr. Keene, you have the floor." Arthur stood. He wasn't addressing the judge. He was addressing the room. "Your Honor," Arthur said, his voice clear and resonant. "Before his death, Walter Gray left one final instruction, a message for his true heir. With the court's permission, I would like to play it now." The courtroom monitors, the same ones that showed the docket, flickered to life, and suddenly, Walter Gray's face was everywhere. His eyes, my eyes, sharp and assessing, stared out at us. His voice, a low gravel, filled the room. "If you found this," he said, "it means you're doing real work. It means you're not afraid to get your hands dirty. It means you're not one of them, the soft ones, the takers. You're a Gray. This trigger, this whole plan. It wasn't a test. It was a hello. Now, go to work." The video clicked off. A profound, heavy silence hung in the air. The ghost had spoken. He had confirmed the entire premise. The integrity trigger wasn't a loophole. It was a lock. And I was the key. "We have also," Arthur continued, his voice cutting through the silence, "submitted the founding charter of Gray Maritime, recovered from the same drive. It explicitly designates the verified living issue of Claire Gray as the secondary heir. Ms. Jenkins is not an opportunist. Your Honor, She is the designated successor. He turned, gesturing to Dr. Aris, the handwriting expert. And this charter confirms what Dr. Aris has already testified. The renunciation, filed by Mr. Hale, was a 100% forgery, an illegal, fraudulent document designed to disenfranchise the designated heir. The judge looked at Robert Hale. Counselor, do you have any response to a 30-second video of the deceased, verifying the petitioner's claim? Scanlon stood, but he was broken. Your Honor, my client, we maintain this is a sophisticated media campaign. Judge Shaw cut him off with a slice of her hand. A media campaign? Mr. Scanlon, are you suggesting the SAA 256 hash verifying the drive's integrity is media? Are you suggesting the notarized corporate charter is media? The truth is verifiable evidence. Your client's attempt to purchase advertising at Haven Ridge Airport yesterday, in direct violation of this court's restraining order. That is a media campaign, and it has failed. Sit down. She turned, her eyes softening for just a fraction of a second as she looked at my mother. Ms. Gray, you are here under subpoena. You heard the testimony. You saw the video. This court asks you one final time, is Zoe Jenkins your daughter, and the granddaughter of Walter Gray? My mother stood up. She was trembling, but her voice was clear. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the judge. She was looking at Robert. I was a coward, she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. I was terrified. Robert Hale. He told me Walter hated me. He told me he would take my daughter. I signed papers he put in front of me. I signed medical forms. I signed waivers. I was ashamed, and I was afraid. She took a deep breath. But I never signed that renunciation. I never, ever, signed away my inheritance. That is a forgery. He did that. She finally turned. She looked at me, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in what felt like my entire life. There was no apology. There was just, at last, the truth. I confirm, she said to the entire courtroom, that Zoe Jenkins is my daughter, and she is the one and only granddaughter of Walter Gray. It was over. Judge Shaw picked up the gavel. She looked at the evidence, the pay stubs, the hard drive, the charter, my mother's confession. This court has heard enough, she said, her voice ringing with absolute finality. I find that the integrity trigger, as written by Walter Gray, is the binding center of this will. And I find that Ms. Zoe Jenkins, through 36 months of documented, self-sufficient labor, has met this trigger completely. She looked directly at me. Your grandfather did not set a test. He set a standard, and you met it. She then turned her gaze, cold as steel, on Robert Hale. This court hereby rules as follows. The petition of Zoe Jenkins is granted. She is restored and recognized as the sole, primary beneficiary of the entire estate of Walter Gray. The fraudulent trust, Eastward Trustees LLC, is dissolved, effective immediately. All assets, accounts, and properties held by Robert Hale in the name of this trust are permanently frozen and forfeit to the Gray estate. Robert Hale just stared, ashen. He was a statue of a dead man. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court finds that the actions of Robert Hale, including forgery, conspiracy, wire fraud, and felony witness tampering, constitute a pattern of criminal behavior. This court is referring this entire file, and Mr. Hale himself, to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal prosecution. The gavel hit the block. Bam! The sound was a sonic boom, the sound of my old life cracking in half. At that exact second, Arthur, who had been waiting, his phone in his hand, hit a single button across the country in the main departures hall of Haven Ridge International, the PA system, which usually announced delays, chimed. It was not the standard chime, it was a clear, three-tone bell, the one reserved for special announcements. In Terminal C, the massive LED screen, the one Robert Hale had purchased for his arrogant, History is returning ad flickered. His ad vanished. It was replaced by a new slide, a clean white background with the old stylized G of the Gray Maritime logo. The text read, "The Walter Gray Foundation." And underneath, a new line appeared, the letters rolling out one by one, filling the 20-foot screen, announcing the For Those Who Show Up Scholarship Fund, administered by Zoe Jenkins. My name, in the hall, on the board, where thousands of people could see it. Back in the courtroom, Robert Hale stood frozen, his face slack as he heard the judgment. He had lost the money. He had lost his freedom. He had lost his name. My mother was looking at me. She wasn't crying. She was just looking, seeing me, finally seeing the daughter she had cut from the frame. I didn't cry. I felt a sudden, profound calm. The invisibility was gone. The noise was gone. I just felt solid. I reached into my bag and pulled out my old, cracked, plastic employee ID. The one with my faded picture. The one that read, Zoe Custodial. I placed it on the polished mahogany table in front of me. Arthur smiled. He slid over the official, stamped, and entered court order. The one that confirmed the ruling, 2 business cards, the one they gave me, the one I earned. The last thing I remember is walking out of the courthouse, into the cold Boston air. But my mind was at Haven Ridge. I saw myself, not in the courtroom, but walking through the terminal, pushing past the crowds, toward the exit. I saw myself step into the revolving door, pushing through, from the stale air of the concourse into the rush of the real world. And as I stepped out onto the curb, the light from the massive LED screen flashed across my face, reflecting on my forehead. The touch of a name finally returned to its rightful place. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. Please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.